Honorable Mr. Rompuy, Prime Minister Ansip, dear colleagues and guests, welcome to Estonia, welcome to Riigikogu. Before we start, let me just say a few words in Estonian for introduction. Austatud kuulajad, Euroopas on hetkel äärmiselt põnevad ajad. Ühelt poolt nõutakse Euroopa Liidu üha sügavamat lõimumist ja tihedamat koostööd, samas on ka poliitilisi jõude, kes sooviksid liikuda kardinaalselt vastupidises suunas. Euroopa tuleviku kujundavad debatid on eriti aktuaalsed ja seda ka Eestis. Need mõttetalgud ei pea tingimata toimuma ainult poliitilistes ringkondades, mistõttu ongi meie tänases auditooriumis eriti hea meel näha ettevõtjaid, ülikoolide juhte, ajakirjanikke, riigiametnikke, arvamusliidreid. Mul on Riigikogu Euroopa Liidu asjade komisjoni esimehena siiralt hea meel, et koostöös Riigikantseleiga õnnestus meil täna esinema saada Euroopa üks mõjuvõimsamaid poliitikuid, kellel on vaieldamatult väga oluline roll Euroopa tuleviku kujundamisel. Herman Van Rompuy valiti Euroopa Ülemkogu alaliseks eesistujaks 1. detsembril 2009, tulles sellesse ametisse Belgia peaministrina. Tema ülesanneteks Ülemkogu eesistujana on riigipeade ja valitsusjuhtide kohtumiste juhatamine, kokkulepete sõlmimine ja ka Euroopa Liidu esindamine välissuhetes, sealhulgas sellistes foorumitel nagu G8 ja G20. Herman Van Rompuy on kahtlemata silmapaistev ja võimekas poliitik. Tema juhtimise all saavutati hiljuti 8. veebruari ülemkogul kokkulepe Euroopa Liidu järgmise eelarve osas aastani 2020. Eelarve, mis tõi eestlastele väga palju häid uudiseid. Järgmisena oodatakse härra Rompuylt juunikuu ülemkoguks tugevama majandus- ja rahaliidu loomise ettepanekuid ja tähtajalist tegevuskava. Härra Rompuy tänase sõnavõtu pealkiri on Estonia in Europe, looking to the future. Olgu veel öeldud, et meil on võimaldatud ka eesti-inglisekeelne tõlge ja peale sõnavõttu jääb aega ka paariks-kolmeks küsimusteks. Head kuulamist ja mis veelgi olulisem, head kaasamõtlemist. So, once again, Mr. Rompuy, it's a great pleasure to have you in Estonian Parliament. The floor is yours.
Madam Speaker, Mr. Prime Minister Diandrus, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I am particularly glad to be in Estonia today and to have the opportunity to meet you during my visit. Many thanks, Madam Speaker, for this invitation. I am myself a former Speaker of the House, so I feel very close to the Parliament and to a presidency. I'm always struck every time I come to Tallinn, it is the third time I come to Tallinn in 3 years' time, by how much it embodies some of the best of what Europe can be. A beautiful city, steeped in history, home to a close community and a strong sense of heritage and identity. A haven of individual freedoms and the beating heart of one of the most innovative, technologically advanced democracies in the world, resolutely turned towards the future. In the context of the economic difficulties of the past years, many have turned to Estonia and to its impressive economic recovery for inspiration and for encouragement. It is, of course, only half the story. And I'm conscious that all too often the intensity of the blow to your economy early in the financial crisis, the sacrifices you have made, and the scars on your economy that you are still tending, all this is often too easily brushed aside by outsiders who only wish to hail the miracle recovery. Yet Estonia's return to a healthy economy, one of the most promising in Europe, is undeniably a success story and one that is due to the will and the hard work of its people. Now, I should say from the start that I did not come here today to look back and to set out Estonia as a model, the perfect recipe, if you will, of how to triumph over economic difficulties through courageous, relentless measures and a shared sense of determination. Though, as you know, it wouldn't be difficult to do so. But rather, I should like to turn towards the future. These have been very difficult years for Europe. Yet I am fully confident that our countries will come out of the crisis together and stronger. We are already in a much better place than only a few months ago. Measuring the road already traveled should give us confidence in our ability to keep moving forward towards full recovery. Time and again, our countries have demonstrated their common resolve to do what was necessary and step in when needed to overcome the crisis. The Eurozone is now on a much sounder footing. We are better equipped to detect and prevent imbalances and to deal with the challenges at hand. This has been the result of very hard work, of brave and sensible decisions, and Estonia, the Eurozone's most recent member state, has fully played its part. To me, one of the lasting and most transformative impacts that those years will have brought to Europe as a whole is in a change of the mindset. A deeper consciousness of how much we actually depend on each other. Sometimes it is hard to accept that we have to live with each other and with each other's problems. But we have become really interdependent. This knowledge of interdependency need not to be fatalistic. Far from it. It's a fact of life, yes, but we can translate this into something positive. A shared sense of responsibility and the knowledge that this very interdependence in the end makes us stronger. Ladies and gentlemen, since the beginning of the year, there are confirmed signs that financial stability is returning to the Eurozone. This is very important when we look to our immediate future, as stability is the precondition for all other results. Indeed, it is key to the return of confidence for consumers, business and enterprises in all our countries, and for clients and investors in Europe and abroad. But every time we turn a corner, we must keep in mind that just around the corner lies the danger of complacency, at the level of the member states and at the level of the Union as a whole. There is no way back. There are no alternatives. I say this at this very moment. And this we simply cannot afford, this danger of complacency, because it will take time before the full impact of our efforts so far to stabilize the euro area can be felt in terms of growth and employment. Confidence always takes time to come back. And even once confidence is back, the real economy always reacts with a time lag. So in the meantime, we need to keep moving forward. As the example of Estonia reminds all other Europeans, much of this is in the hands of individual countries, resting on the resolve of their national governments, parliaments, and of their citizens. But there is also much that can be done together as a union. Starting with putting into practice the things we have already agreed upon. We have set out strong rules for ourselves and a solid roadmap to ensure our economies are sound and sustainable, and that the Eurozone becomes more solid and more stable. Just last week saw the finalization and adoption of the last pending rules to reinforce budgetary coordination between Eurozone countries and ensure that all keep moving towards sound public finances. With this deal, in our language, and I apologize for this, the so-called two-pack, this after the six-pack, after the fiscal compact, and so on. So with this deal, the so-called two-pack, And after the entry into force of the fiscal compact at the beginning of the year, we have completed our common toolbox on the budgetary front. Now the top priority is implementation, making sure that all these tools are put to good use in our countries. I know this priority is something Estonia takes very seriously. Your Prime Minister has told me many times, and indeed again this afternoon. And your country leads the way, for instance, in acting swiftly upon common decisions and translating them into national legislation. Just last week, Estonia ranked again among the best Europeans in that respect. So, first priority, implementing the measures we have already agreed. Second priority, pushing forward on agreeing new measures that we know are key for our economies. We have already mapped the way forward on a number of fronts, to name but some among the most important. Setting up a strong single banking supervision system for the Eurozone, to prevent future bank failures and to avoid taxpayers having to pick up the bill. It should be up and running as soon as possible next year. Deepening the single market, our most powerful asset to create more opportunities for our companies and for our citizens. And here let me single out a particular pressing and promising area that needs no introduction in Estonia, our digital agenda for Europe. And third point, harnessing our trading power as a motor for growth. Here, the recent launch of trade talks between the European Union and the United States could open up huge horizons and help create millions of jobs on both sides of the Atlantic. And another point, using the full potential of the EU's multi-annual budget, which as an investment budget can have real added value. For instance, in connecting our countries across borders, like through Rail Baltica, one of Europe's priority projects in infrastructure. Ladies and gentlemen, pushing forward on such projects is clearly in our interest. It is good for our economies, good for confidence, and good for growth and jobs. But we also need to identify new fronts, to keep exploring new ideas and setting up new initiatives. And this is our third priority, to focus on innovation in the widest sense of the term. The nature and the scale of problems is changing, and to overcome these challenges we need new solutions. The biggest threat to our societies comes from the dramatic levels of unemployment caused by the crisis, which are wrecking the lives of individuals and households across our countries and hitting particularly hard our youth. Even here in Estonia, where unemployment figures are decreasing faster than anywhere else in the euro area, still 1 in 5 young people are struggling to find a job. Faced with such serious circumstances, we cannot afford to let slip away new ideas that could help improve the situation in any way, from local initiatives and regional measures to national policies and European projects. We must all be fully mobilized. We must find fair and effective answers. Europe stands already to help such initiatives emerge. This is why the multi-annual budget 2014-2020 that was agreed earlier this month by the EU leaders, I insisted that we should set aside €6 billion specifically dedicated to fighting youth unemployment. This money will go to projects across Europe to help young people in some of the worst affected regions to get a foothold in the job market. Our societies need to take a fresh look at key questions like skills and education, lifelong learning, rethink the way we consider careers, and reinvent the way we look at companies. We need new solutions, for instance, for active and healthy lives in aging societies. mobility answers to overcome mismatches in our economies, in our job markets, new ways to protect our environment and ensure a sustainable use of resources, dependable energy sources with better networks and wider range of local energy resources to ensure no country is left isolated and eliminated what we call energy islands, an issue leaders will discuss in May in the European Council. And finally, digital solutions too, an area where Estonia is a world leader. For the world, there is a lot of inspiration to be found in the way that you have embraced the opportunities offered by a digital economy, making the concept of a start-up nation, a wired nation, a reality, making lives of citizens and business simpler and richer, creating new connections, and finding new ways to waste less time and less resources. No doubt the Prime Minister will share some of this expertise at the summit I decided to dedicate specifically to this issue this autumn in October. One thing I find particularly inspiring is the way that in embracing a digital economy, rather than being put off by very real risks, you turn these risks into opportunities. Seeing cybersecurity not as an unwanted but necessary burden, but instead as a way of opening up new horizons, of enabling companies and individuals to feel more secure as they venture further and invent the economy of the future. I think it says a lot about the way your country sees the world. What a country like Estonia brings to the European Union is this drive to keep improving, to keep finding innovative solutions, an optimistic outlook on the future. This is not politically correct, an optimistic outlook at the future. Time and again, I come across surveys that place Estonia way at the top of charts in terms of optimism in Europe. I am never surprised because I know this optimism is grounded in a knowledge of the opportunities that lie ahead. Optimism is a moral duty, is a well-known quote. We need it in these days, I can assure you. Although I prefer the word hope. Hope is, in my view, a verb. When your country, ladies and gentlemen, joined the euro over 2 years ago now, some questioned this optimistic attitude. In fact, and rightly, you took the longer-term view, knowing the euro was bound to overcome the difficulties, that your economy was bound to benefit from adopting it, and that from the inside you would be able to help shape common rules in a way that you couldn't if you waited longer. This view has already been rewarded with stability and high growth rates in the past 2 years. This didn't go unnoticed, of course, also in other countries that were planning to join the euro area, and we look forward to welcoming Latvia, who is set on joining at the beginning of next year as full member of the club. Estonia joining the euro area has meant a lot to Estonia. But it has also meant a lot to the euro area. In the darkest hours of the crisis, I often said half-jokingly that as long as new countries choose to adopt the euro, as long as our club attracted new members, it proved that the single currency was still sexy, ladies and gentlemen. This demonstration of confidence was important at that time, and indeed makes of Estonia a very special member of the Eurozone. But to my eyes, what mattered even more with Estonia joining the Euro is that to us Europeans, the Euro is much more than a currency. For our countries, the Euro is a symbol, opening up further possibilities, and anchoring us in a common European destiny in a shared space of freedom and security. Coming from a small nation myself, I am deeply aware that size matters. It is key to preserving tight communities attached to a language or a culture. But in a globalized world, this is made all the easier when you are part of a wider entity. We wouldn't trade our small size, but we know we are best placed to make the most of its benefits when, by teaming up with others, we open up more space for more freedom. Europe has to be precisely that, a haven. A haven allowing us to be ourselves more freely, to raise our voices and develop beyond what we would ever achieve alone. A place where our ideas can echo further and louder, meeting other ideas along the way. And that is true for all European countries, the bigger and the smaller. But above all, Europe remains the world's largest and most secure haven for individual freedoms, something that all too often we Europeans tend to take for granted. Of course, Europe looks very different depending on where you stand. But when, as one of the freest countries of the world like Estonia, your borders are Europe's borders, then this knowledge becomes much more immediate. The experience of what a difference it makes to be on this side of that border, to be in Europe, and more precisely, in the European Union. And no one can remind Europeans better of this than a country like Estonia. We are lucky, ladies and gentlemen, to count you among us. Thank you.
That concerns Estonians the most. How are the negotiations with MFF going on in Europe, in European Parliament, and how do you see these negotiations and very hard political statements will end up?
Thank you. I had that question also at the occasion of the press conference. So what we did was, and we did it together also with your Prime Minister, what we did was quite an achievement, because we have to find an agreement among 27 leaders, the smallest egos in one of the countries. So we have to find an agreement with 27 leaders, and at the same time agreeing on a budget, a shrinking budget. For the very first time, the European budget of the upcoming 7 years is less in volume than that of the previous 7 years. So we are really living now in budgetary terms in the times of real budgetary cuts. The very first time that this happened. So with 27 embarking and negotiating and agreeing on cuts. But at the same time, keeping in mind that the budget is not only the sum of 27 national interests, and I'm happy that you are happy in Estonia, but keeping in mind also that we have also a European interest to defend. And that's why we attach such an importance to the agenda of growth and jobs. And that particular chapter, what we call the chapter on competitiveness, is growing with 37% in the upcoming 7 years. So there is also a focus in the European budget. So in the midst of fiscal consolidation, we kept the main objective of a budget, the objective of growth and jobs, alive. We took our responsibility. Now it is the European Parliament who has to take its responsibilities. And of course, I also took note of recent statements and positions of individuals in the Parliament, members of the Parliament, and of groups. But I think now we have to give time to time. And we are not in a hurry, we are not rushing. I think that the upcoming weeks will show that there are much more positive points in this budget than some are thinking these days, and that the alternative of having annual budgets is not attractive at all for different kinds of reasons. Different kinds of reasons related to the interests of their particular country. Estonia is happy with the outcome, but I'm happy that also other countries are satisfied with the results, and I hope that some in the Parliament will acknowledge this more than they are doing this today. But we will also negotiate with the Parliament on different kinds of issues, so that we can have at the end an agreement also on the budget. So it is not only informing and convincing, it is also negotiating on key elements of the budget, not so much related to the figures, but to qualitative measures as flexibility, and also on an eventual review of the budget during this 7 years period. A review clause then. So I am not desperate at all to find an agreement, and I am convinced that the European Parliament at the end will take its responsibilities as the 27 leaders did, to give Europe what it deserves, a budget for the upcoming 7 years, which we take account of national interests and keep the focus on a huge European agenda.
Thank you. Rait Maruste.
A long answer for a short question.
Thank you. Rait Maruste, Chairman of Constitutional Committee of Estonian Parliament. Mr. Rompuy, you were talking about financial consolidation of the European Union. You were less talking about political consolidation of Europe. Could you please enlighten a bit what is planned in terms of further federalization of Europe or constitutional framework of Europe? Some more words about this direction.
Thank you.
In this direction.
Thank you. This is the issue of what we call democratic legitimacy, and some call it political union. I never used that word, and you didn't either. Let's keep in mind that all the decisions, the major decisions in the European Union the last 3 years, were taken by the European Council of the Council of Ministers, democratically elected and accountable before their parliaments. Some are coming to the European Council, I don't know if it is the case in Estonia, with even a mandate. Some countries, the prime ministers have a strict mandate before they come to Brussels, and afterwards they have to ask for the approval of the consent of their parliament. So they are working, let's put it in a very nice terms, they are working very closely with their parliaments. So the democratic basis of our decisions is guaranteed because a government is accountable at national level before his parliament. And after each European Council, I have to inform the European Parliament, and we have to discuss it with the European Parliament. It's not the same level of accountability, but there is a strong link between the European Council and its decisions and the European Parliament. We can make it even stronger, but it is now as it is in the Lisbon Treaty. When we decide on transfers of sovereignty, for instance in the single supervisory mechanism, when there is a shift of competence, then of course we have to reconsider the repartition of the roles. Then those who are responsible for supervision in some way, have to define in which way, they have to be accountable also in front of the European Parliament. Of course, those new institutions will be independent, but even being independent as the central bank has regular meetings with members of the European Parliament and are reporting regularly to the European Parliament and discussing all kinds of policies, also monetary policy, but the central bank remaining totally independent. So when there is a transfer of sovereignty, we have to involve more the European institutions and more the European Parliament. But even if you have a single supervisory mechanism, the national regulators will still play a role. And so also the national level, the accountability will not be lost, or may not be lost. So I think we can't give you an answer in general terms. You have to look to each transfer of sovereignty, and in each domain we have to find new ways to involve the European Parliament or of national parliaments. Most of the time, the last 3 years, we haven't had a real transfer of sovereignty. Most was on coordination of our policies, of deepening current mechanisms. But a real transfer of sovereignty where the national governments and parliaments are not yet involved anymore, we haven't had it in very rare occasions. So this issue of democratic legitimacy is a real issue, but I can't give you an answer in general. You have to see case by case and competence by competence who to reorganize democratic accountability and legitimacy.
Mati.
Thank you. It's not that we didn't have a chance for discussions in Brussels, but I feel more confident asking this question on my home ground. You touched upon, and indeed in both your report on the EMU reform and in the Commission's blueprint, there is this issue of labor mobility in Europe addressed, and rightly so. There are surveys which show clearly that one of the reasons of our somewhat slower recovery in comparison to, say, America's is the lower level of labor mobility within Europe. But then there are both practical and political issues that affect it. It was less than 2 years ago that the last transition periods for the citizen of my country to the free movement of labor were lifted. We have seen what kind of debate the Bulgaria's and Romania's accession to the free labor movement market has been creating, even in such a traditionally immigrant-friendly country as the UK now. So both in practical terms and politically, how feasible is to addressing this issue? What can be done on the European level in order to enhance the labor mobility?
Mm-hmm. As you said, we have already liberated the labor market, and for the new member states, the last hurdle was for Romania and Bulgaria, and we are lifting this in some of our member states. I did it for Romania and Bulgaria whilst I was Prime Minister in my country, even earlier than the latest possible date. But all over the history of the European community and the European Union, we had a lot of labor mobility. Italians working in Belgian mines, Spanish and Portuguese just after their accession. It was a mobility not related to thousands of people, but to millions of people. We often underestimate the mobility that already took place in the last 60 years. That's my first point, is that it happened. Even if in these days, of course, in a period of unemployment and of recession, it's more delicate to do this than in a period of economic growth. That's evident. But we did it. And if we ask each time ourselves if everybody is enthusiastic, then you do simply nothing. Governments took their responsibility. They are accountable before their parliaments and before public opinion. And this labor mobility was organized in the way it was. And I think we have to pursue in this. What we are speaking now about is that if we have an economic and monetary union, we have capital mobility at first. We organize mobility of goods and services, what we called free trade. We took the necessary measures, as I mentioned, to create a more unified labor market. But we are not a nation as the United States. We have 23 languages in our countries. And I can assure you, in my country, the mobility between the north and the south is very low. In such a small country of 30,000 square kilometers, even less big than Estonia. You have 45,000 square kilometers. So I read my file very carefully. But labor mobility is a problem inside our countries, in Italy, in many other countries, in Belgium also. And is a problem related to the union, is a problem for the union as a whole, and cultural differences plays a role in all this. What we are now aiming for is that when there is shortage for certain professions and in some regions of labor, and this is still the case, I can speak on behalf of my country, then it is a pity to lose this occasion to give job opportunities to people who have no jobs in other parts of the union. So there is the legal possibility to do, but you can also encourage this. It is not an ideal situation. The ideal situation is that you find work in your neighborhood or in your own country. But let's face the situation as it is, with the huge differences we have, social differences, economic differences in the union. We can correct this mismatch, not for millions of people, but for an impressive number of people. So we are not organizing huge migrations, but let's make our labor market more perfect, and let's implement what we decided, and let's even encourage labor mobility, certainly from those regions with high and certainly youth unemployment to those regions who still have needs and can give job opportunities to people. It is not a matter of a legal framework now. It is a matter of encouraging and giving opportunities.
Thank you. The last question.
Thank you. Sirja Rank, a journalist from Estonian Business Daily. Thank you for your speech. You mentioned change of mindset. Italian voters have just given a resounding no to policies that ensure Euro's survival. How will you win back the support of EU citizens, EU people, to Euro and the call to more Europe? Thank you.
I'm not an Italian politician, but I think at the end we will only convince people by our results. And of course we are going through a difficult period now. We restored in some way financial stability the last 6 months, even fragile, even at the beginning of a process, but a much better situation than in June, July of last year. But before you see the results in terms of economic growth, it takes some time. There is a time lag, as I said. And even if you restore economic growth, the impact on the job market takes also some time. So we have to take this in mind. And organizing elections, of course, and we have to on a regular basis, but organizing elections in the midst of this transition is always a risk. Because you can say to the people, we are turning the corner, but if they don't see the results in terms of growth and certainly in terms of jobs and of income, living standards, then it's difficult to convince them. At the end, we will only convince them if we pursue our policies and we can show the results of our policies. That was the case in Estonia. That you can say, we launched the euro and it produced results in terms of growth and jobs. And then people are much easier reconciled with an idea than if they don't only see, they see only the negative aspects without seeing the positive outcomes of the initiative you took. So I think it is also a matter of rhetoric and of language by the leaders. When there is a problem, they have often the tendency to say it is the responsibility of it is due to Brussels. It is Europe who is the fault of everything. That's, let's say, a speech which is rather common all over the Union. It is a problem of language and of rhetoric. But it's also a problem of results. At the end, people believe you when you can show that your track was the right track also for them. I'm convinced we will succeed. But we are now in the midst of the storm. We are in the midst of a very difficult economic period. But I'm convinced that I will see the promised land, not in my mandate, because that will last until the 1st of December 2014. But we'll see a stable and prosperous Eurozone, and that all the efforts we made the last 3 years will bear fruit.
Thank you very much. Head külalised, meie kohtumine on läbi. Tore, et tulite. Ma loodan, et kõigil oli väga huvitav ja loodetavasti meie debatid Euroopa tuleviku, see tähendab ka Eesti tuleviku teemal jätkuvad ja me näeme teid ka siin Riigikogus. Aitäh!